When I think about snuggling up and watching a good Christmas movie, I of course picture It's a Wonderful Life, Scrooged, and A Christmas Story. Unfortunately, none of those movies were made into games, so if I want to celebrate this season with a controller in my hand, then my options are limited to a handful of Home Alone games. So in an attempt to get into the festive mood, I say bring on the Wet Bandits. Turn back now if you don't want to know what happens next, because today we're going to spoil the story and ending for Home Alone 1 and 2 on the Super NES and Genesis. This is Game Over, the early years. So, I should probably start out this episode by mentioning that I was never a big fan of Home Alone. I think Macaulay Culkin has a lot of charisma, and I don't actively dislike the movie, but the slapstick humor didn't do it for me. It's basically The Purge for kids. But no matter what you think of the film, I think we can all agree that the games are garbage. Every single one of them. If you've been watching our Electronic Gaming Monthly Best and Worst Award show, then you already know that Home Alone kept winning the worst movie to game category year after year after year. So, if I don't like the movie and the games are terrible, then what are we doing here? Well, it was either this or Days Before Christmas, and the ending of Days Before Christmas is somehow even worse than Home Alone. In fact, I'm going to make the case that the Home Alone endings are arguably the best part, at least when it comes to the Super NES versions. You know the story. Kevin McAllister is accidentally left home alone and forced to protect his house against a pair of bumbling burglars. These two sit outside in a van plotting ways to steal the jewels, VCRs, TVs, and more. They don't seem too concerned about the 10-year-old boy eating ice cream and using aftershave for the first time. But they should be. Tonight is not going to go well for Harry and Marv. Or us. This is a game where you race through a large house, grabbing all the money, jewels, and pizza slices you can find before the burglars get it. That's it. You mostly just run around looking for things to shove in your pockets. Your bottomless pockets. Every so often, you'll want to take the valuables down to the family's giant bank-sized vault, and then it's back to grabbing items and dodging the Wet Bandits. And it's not just the comedic criminals you'll need to worry about, but also ghosts and a giant spider. I mean, at this point, he might as well fight Dracula and the Wolfman. So after you've collected all the jewels, toys, pets, and electronics, it's off to fight a rat and save the day. Now, I just want to pause right here and say that if the movie had ended with Macaulay Culkin fighting a massive rat to the death, there's a chance that Home Alone would be my favorite Christmas movie of all time. But like I was saying, we fight a rat and save the day. Here's what happens next. So, the sequel has Kevin doing pretty much the exact same thing as the first game, only this time around he'll be dodging bouncing luggage, an out-of-control vacuum, and a killer mop in a hotel. Look, nothing about this game makes sense, so just go with me on this one. You'll eventually have to fight an angry chef who loses clothing every time you hit him. I would talk about how inappropriate that is, but the Wet Bandits surprise Kevin and capture our hero. The good news is that Kevin is able to escape to the park. But the bad news is that he's now being stalked by monkeys and perverts. He eventually makes it to his uncle's house, which has definitely seen better days. I mean, there are entire chunks of the floor missing, and the walls have giant holes in them. This is a far cry from the mansion we were protecting in the first game. Kevin is eventually able to escape the Wet Bandits by climbing down a really long rope, but that just means that the chase is on. It's a race through New York City with Harry and Marv hot on his tail. He climbs up a giant Christmas tree in order to make it to safety. And here's what happens next. Now, when it comes to the Genesis games, Sega didn't put a whole lot of time into the endings. To be fair, they didn't exactly put a whole lot of time into the actual games either. But the endings are just embarrassing. For example, after Kevin was able to escape the Wet Bandits by GTAing a sled, this is the single-screen ending we get. Fortunately, the sequel isn't much better. Just like the Super NES game, Kevin is forced to climb a giant Christmas tree in the park and avoid being nabbed by the bandits. He succeeds, and here's what happens next. So yeah, none of these endings are particularly good, with the two Genesis conclusions being pretty terrible. I mean, look, the Super NES games didn't exactly have great endings, but they did give us a proper cinema and digitized versions of Macaulay Culkin, Catherine O'Hara, Daniel Stern, and of course, Joe Pesci. They look pretty good. There's at least some closure in the game, which is nice, I guess. Look, these games are terrible, and I'm stretching just to say anything good about them. Both Home Alone fans and gamers deserve better. So, happy holidays, and from me to you, avoid all 4 of these games. Hey, thanks for watching this holiday-themed episode of Game Over, The Early Years. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes every Monday. So here's the question I have for you. What Christmas movie should be turned into a video game? Don't say Die Hard, there are already Die Hard games. In fact, we did a whole episode about Die Hard just earlier this year. I think I might go with something like Bad Santa or Rare Exports. Those are filled with possibilities. I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, I'm currently hard at work on a bunch of reviews, including Horizon Shift 81, Earth Defense Force 5, Roller Coaster Tycoon Adventures, and a whole bunch more. Plus, we'll be back tomorrow with a new episode of Electronic Gaming Monthly's Best and Worst Awards of 1996. It's a crazy episode. Trust me on that one. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.